Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unearth Horticulture. Today we are going to continue on with this little mini series on plant morphology, and in case you missed last week's episode on leaves, I definitely encourage you to check it out, but I will also define morphology for you because it sounds like a really ominous word, but really morphology just means the study of the physical characteristics of plants. So their leaves, their flowers, their roots, every part of the plant has different types of names and are categorized in groups of plants based on their morphological features. So this week we are going to delve into, you guessed it, flowers, and I have a few examples here to show you some unique forms of flowers and flower parts, and we're just going to briefly go over these examples and talk about one of the things that I love most, flowers. To make this episode more simple, I broke it down into two parts. First, we're going to talk about an inflorescence, what an inflorescence is, and what variations you might see in different plants. Then we're going to talk about petal-like structures on plants and what those can look like. Those are two really interesting parts of floral morphology, and I have some really cool examples to show you. So let's dive in. First, we're going to talk about inflorescences. An inflorescence is basically defined as the composite flower head of a plant. So an inflorescence may contain one flower, so one set of reproductive parts, or it might contain many florets, which is, that means it might have many individual flowers with their own set of reproductive parts within one flower head. So to demonstrate this term, I have a zinnia flower head here to talk to you about. So this inflorescence type is a disc and ray inflorescence type, and it is called that because, well, first it's disc shaped, but each petal, each individual single petal has its own set of reproductive parts, and then each disc flower has its own set of reproductive parts. So this zinnia head, this zinnia inflorescence, actually has many florets inside of it. So it has the potential to produce many seeds, not just one seed because it has one set of reproductive parts, but it has the potential to produce many seeds because it has actually many flowers inside one composite head, one inflorescence. So, are you with me so far? I hope so. So that is an example of a disc and ray inflorescence. Now, there are many shapes of inflorescences, many types of inflorescences in the plant world, and I have a few to show you here as examples. So first, the next most commonly thought of flower inflorescence type is the spike. Now, what's less commonly thought of as a flower is a grass head. However, grass heads are actually inflorescence. They are flower heads, and they're a spike because they're formed in a spike shape. And the individual florets and eventual seeds are attached directly to the stem in a spike form. There are other types of spikes. So actually this aloe hybrid right here is a spike inflorescence. It has a single floret attached directly to a central stem, a central spike. Then you have a moth orchid. This is a less obvious spike flower, but actually this whole stalk and then all of the buds and blooms on this orchid are actually part of one inflorescence, one flower structure called a spike. Let's see, do I have any other spikes here to show you? Oh yes, this Verbena stricta. This is a native in our prairies, and it has a spike flower head. So each individual flower blooms, and it continues to form more and more florets as the season continues until it's too cold for it to bloom anymore. Its season is past, and these Verbena stricta flower spikes are really cool because they can actually end up several feet long if it's a granddaddy plant, if it goes long enough flowering in the season. So those are example of spike type inflorescences. So we've looked at the disc and ray type inflorescence on the zinnias, and actually cosmos is another example of that. We've looked at spikes with this verbena, the grass, the orchid, and the aloe. There are also what's called cymes, C-Y-M-B, and it's kind of a weird inflorescence name, but cymes have almost a bouquet-like inflorescence shape where they have several flowers connected to a central, almost basal point. This cilantro is an example of that. And then I also have this euphorbia, snow on the mountain, as an example of what a cyme looks like. Let's see, I have two other inflorescence types here. I have this Spathe and Spadix type. Now this is more common in your houseplant, your foliage plants. Plants in the family Araceae, or the aroid plants, have this flower type. It's very unique. So the heart-shaped part of the inflorescence called the spathe, and it's actually a modified leaf, and it's there to be a showy part to attract pollinators, I would assume, to the spadix, which is the actual flower of the plant, the nose of the flower. And like I said, plants in the Araceae family, so your monsteras, philodendrons, peace lilies, anthuriums, these are the type of plants that have that unique Spathe Spadix type inflorescence. Then I have this peperomia. This peperomia is, I've had several of you ask me what the stringy parts are coming from your peperomias or coming from mine on social media. These are actually the flowers. And you know, I'm not completely sure, and it's okay because there are a lot of weird variations, but I'm pretty sure this peperomia is a spike inflorescence as well. And that's just because the individual reproductive parts along this peperomia flower are attached directly to the petiole, to the stem of the inflorescence. So peperomia are actually in the Piperaceae family, or the peppercorn family. And so peppercorn, like table pepper, is actually produced on an inflorescence that is shaped something like this. So it's a really interesting flower. It doesn't actually have petals. And that's something hard to wrap your brain around, but not all flowers have petals. So on that note, we're going to move into the second part of what I want to discuss today, which is petals. So within a flower, there are traditionally what you would think of in a flower, I should say. You would have the sepals, so the leaf-like kind of collar part of the flower. Then you have the petals, which are the pretty showy part, the part that we like to see, the colored part. And then you have the central reproductive organs, so the ovaries, style, stigma, the female parts, and then the anthers, which are the male parts. So that's traditionally what we think of as the parts of the flower. However, sometimes parts of those are absent, sometimes there are other parts present, modified petals, for example, or modified leaves that look like petals. So we're going to talk about a couple of variations that are really cool. The first one is bracts. Now, there is a common family of plants that is known for producing showy bracts that actually look like petals, and those are the euphorbias. So snow on the mountain is an example, and you can see it has these white and green striped bracts that are surrounding the actual reproductive flower, which is called the cyathea. And another plant that does this that is so closely related is the Christmas poinsettia. So those red, sometimes red, they can be pink, orange, other colors, those red parts that look like petals are actually considered bracts. And they're modified leaves that attract pollinators to the center cyathea, the actual flower that contains the actual reproductive parts, that part of the plant. So that's kind of a cool petal-like modification. And then the other one I wanted to talk to you about that's really cool that I couldn't go with pass up pointing it out to you today is on this Phalaenopsis orchid. So these orchid flowers, these individual florets, actually have what are called tepals. Tepals are modified sepals that are not actual petals because petals have reproductive flower parts. So this orchid has 3 tepals that are behind the 3 petals in the front, and it has 2 wing-like petals plus the face part of the orchid, the throat of the orchid, which is a modified petal. So tepals are interesting, and they're present on more plants than you would think. Lilies often have them, where the back 3 petal-like structures are actually called tepals, and then the front 3 are the true petals. So tepals, they're another interesting petal-like modification that you find in the inflorescence in the flower world. So I've gone over a lot of terminology in this video. So if you have any questions at all, make sure you drop them in the comments below. Let me know your questions. I hope you found this floral morphological video. Wow, that was a mouthful. This floral morphological video helpful or interesting at the very least. If you have questions, drop them below. And until next week, you've been watching Unearth Horticulture.